We're on.
You're on?
Denise, please mute.
Hello and good morning, everyone. This is greetings from the Southern California team, USA, and I'm your host, Roopshi Berman. I am an IT professional and founder and CEO of Hope and Life Foundation, a nonprofit established almost a decade ago to serve women and children in the US and in the Indian subcontinent. My co-host and soul sister, Diane Mitchell Henry, and I bring to you the much-awaited discussion on mental resilience for climate change solutions. With a panel of phenomenal women who have contributed for decades on this topic, we will present to you today actual climate crisis situations and what we as women have done or are doing to get families back on their feet. My co-host, Diane Mitchell Henry, is the CEO and president of Diane Mitchell Henry Network, an enterprise that promotes, educates, and inspires global engagement for social justice and economic unity. Diane and I are grateful for the support of our sponsor, Sonia Young Adam of California Black Women's Health Project. This nonprofit organization is the only one in the state of California that is solely committed to improving the health of California's 1.2 million Black women and girls through advocacy, education, outreach, and policy. They focus on empowering Black women to take personal responsibility for their own health, as well as advocate for changes in policies that negatively affect Black women's health. They have a mental health toolkit on their website that any of us can access, and I would sincerely request you to check out that valuable resource when you have some time. We know resilience is the ability to adapt to life's misfortunes and setbacks. When we are resilient, we harness our inner strength that helps us rebound from a setback or challenge. I will share with you an instance of mental resilience where my organization, Hope in Life Foundation, has been able to help. For this, I will take you to the remote villages of the Sundarbans area, which is the largest mangrove forest in the world. It's in the Ganges Delta in India. The impact of climate change. Residents of the dozens of the islands in the Indian part of the Sundarbans have seen their homes swallowed by the sea and their farmland poisoned by salt water, forcing many to relocate. Just as the sea has been encroaching into the tigers' hunting grounds, Sundarbans are the tigers' hunting grounds, pushing them to target humans and livestock. It has also forced humans into tiger territory. Understandable? And this has put them at even greater risk of tiger attacks. They're animals. They do what they do best for survival, right? Social ostracization in this part of the world. There are hundreds of Bagh Bidhovas, as we call them, or tiger widows, who lose their husbands to these tiger attacks and are put up and have to put up with societal stigma in addition to losing their family members, their homes, and probably the only breadwinner of their households. Being resilient, they do everything in their capacity to feed their children and in-laws. Now you're looking at the subcontinent, India, where this is very common. It's multi-generational. Children live with their parents, daughters-in-law live with their in-laws, and all of that goes on, right? So you have multi-generational families living under the same roof. So when the breadwinner passes on, it is the responsibility of the wife and the children to feed the rest of the family. So understand the pressure here. There's lack of insurance. It is interesting to note that life insurance from the state of Bengal is available for tiger widows, but it only applies within the regulated fishing areas and not in the core areas of the Sundarbans, where these families are actually forced to go and fish because fish is not really available as much as it used to many years ago. And since most of the fishermen fish in these core areas and not in the regulated fishing areas, they don't even get insurance coverage. Tourism activities associated with the Tiger Reserve. Now, remember, this is the Tiger Reserve and it has heavy tourism. People from all of the world, leading magazines and newspapers all send their people to this area to film the tigers because they are gorgeous beings, right? And tourism activities associated with the Tiger Reserve have further exacerbated the problem by restricting the area in which fishing is allowed. All of this has left the tiger widows, already socially ostracized, increasingly reliant on the NGOs like ourselves for financial support. Or they will be forced to fish or gather honey deep in the mangroves in the core area, leaving them with the same fate as their husbands. During the 2020 Amphan cyclone that hit the Sundarban areas, our organization, Hope and Life Foundation, collaborated with doctors on the ground who went to a few of those villages to distribute essential supplies, like rice and potatoes, feminine hygiene products, malaria medicines. As the humanitarian efforts continued to keep thousands of people alive temporarily, rehabilitation of families was in the works by local government. The locals continued to adapt to changes in their livelihood driven by changes in the environment. Farmers have been cultivating self-resistant strains of rice. For others, overfishing has led to leaner catches, understandable again. The shrinking coastline threatens the tradition of sun-drying fish on the beaches. Sun-dried fish, as most of you know, is exported worldwide from, regions like India. And they also try and cultivate salt-resistant strains of rice. They send their children to local schools so that they can have better lives. By sending their children to nearby cities for employment, they also risk transcending the physical safety boundary line, as you can understand. But they must in order to keep alive. So this is a classic example of mental resilience to fight back against what they had not, had thought about, had not prepared in this lifetime. So they're pushed into all of these circumstances, and these women are coming out and trying to give their children a better life. With that story, I set the foundation for today's discussion by our esteemed panelists. I will now pass on the baton to my co-host, Diane Mitchell-Henry. Thank you, everyone. Diane, over to you.
Today, I want to say it is such an honor and a pleasure to welcome everyone to our session. It has been an experience to work with Rupshi over the years and having our common interest in global affairs. I would like to recognize the speakers that we have for today. You are in for a treat for fantastic sharing of stories, the struggles, the strategies that have been used over the years, and coming up with some additional solutions for today's event. The primary focus on today is not just about the factors that have affected us through the climate experience. However, we are looking at what we need to do in order to power up our action, to power up our engagement in the fight for social justice that affects all facets of our life, including climate change. And so we are focusing on powering up our self esteem, powering up our self worth, and powering up our um, our whole demeanor about what it takes in order to continue. And of course, we're doing this in unity. So, on that point, I would like to introduce Sadanya Young Adon, who is our champion sponsor, as well as moderating for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane and Ripsy. It is such an honor to be with you all here this morning. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be in this space. And I'd like to just say on behalf of the staff and board and network of the California Black Women's Health Project, we commend you for bringing this important topic and conversation to the audience today. I would like to introduce you all to our next presenter. I'd like to introduce you to Brenda Counts. And Brenda is an international speaker, vocalist, and author in Los Angeles, California, whose primary passion is speaking truth to power over the lives of women and girls. For more than 20 years, Brenda delivered keynote speeches, seminars, and workshops for the reporting industry, conventions, and students. Brenda has spoken for the Jack and Jill of America and Habitat for Humanity's organizations. Brenda's career mandated international travel as a celebrated expert with 52 years of court and congressional stenography. As a freelance deposition officer, Brenda covered depositions in North America, Asia, South America, and Central America. In 1985, Brenda was the first woman and person of color stenographer to transcribe the presidential State of the Union message. Brenda recorded the Joyful Jazz CD in 2015 and published her first book in 2021, Inspirational Quotes. Thank you so much, and I hope that you will appreciate Brenda. Brenda, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you very much, Sonia. Hello, everyone. I thank you for your time and attention today. And I want to speak on inspired leadership and self-care mindfulness. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, and become more, you are a leader. As we see grassroots and community-led solutions to worldwide social and economic equity issues, especially as it pertains to climate change, we must be mindful to embody the energies of positivity, creativity, and boldness. These are the qualities of inspired leadership. All leadership begins with self-leadership. And self-leadership must be built on a solid foundation of mindfulness, self-love, and self-care. Today, our focus is on women and girls. I believe that when we uplift the givers and nurturers of life, we uplift entire families, and the force for good is exponential. I'm here today to encourage our rising leaders and to remind you that your own well-being is foremost. You must fill your own cup to overflowing and then give from your saucer. If you give from your cup, you will deplete yourself and everyone in your sphere of influence will suffer. We each have our own story. I certainly have a story of survival and overcoming trauma, tragedy, and grief, and of victory and success. That's another whole talk, which I often deliver. But today, I'm going to share a few principles I live by for healing, for laying a solid foundation for emotional, physical, and spiritual resilience. First, I will begin with what I call my 4 basics, my 4 daily basics. 1, breathe slowly and deeply. 2, hydrate fully. 3, stretch your body. 4, rest sufficiently. Those 4 are game changers and become more so with each passing decade. Second, stay in the present moment. The past is over and the future is not here yet. Focusing on the past feeds depression. Focusing on the future feeds anxiety. As for the past, nothing that was ever said or done to you, no matter how unspeakable it was, has permanently damaged who you are at the core of your being. Deep within, you are and will always be beautifully and wonderfully made. Only that powerful story you've told yourself about what happened to you has any lasting ability to change you. So if you must recall your story, please be sure to tell it in a way that empowers and uplifts you. Know that there is absolutely no benefit in worrying. Most of the things you worry about will never even happen. Your life is happening now. Third is forgiveness. Love yourself unconditionally and forgive yourself for all mistakes you've made, great or small. And forgive everyone who has ever hurt or disappointed you. But forgiveness in no way implies that any relationship should either be continued or resumed. Forgiveness has everything to do with honoring and releasing your pain. Next, seek inner peace in the present moment. Choose an attitude of gratitude every day. The more grateful you are, the more you will have to be grateful for. Also, health does not always come from medicine. Most of the time, it comes from peace of mind, a loving heart, a peaceful spirit, and most of all, it comes from laughter. It is wise to set aside a few minutes each day to be still and know. Focus inwardly to where your divinity dwells and connect and communicate with that warm, loving presence that is forever seeking an outlet through you. Next, and very, very important, because it affects every aspect of life, your relationships. Always demand to be treated with kindness and respect. 2 simple things. In a relationship that cannot adhere to those 2 minimum human requirements should be peacefully and unceremoniously either moved to the periphery of your life or terminated. It is never too late to begin setting and maintaining healthy standards and boundaries for your life. You don't need anyone's permission. Choose relationships that charge your spirit and move away from those that drain your life force. If you don't have healthy role models for these behaviors in your family or your inner circle, that's okay. It's okay. But you will need to create a system of trusted mentorship and support. Please set about to do that and grant yourself that essential gift. Next is be very mindful what you feed on. We all try to be conscientious about what we put into our mouths. But let us be just as mindful about what we allow to enter our eyes and our ears. For those are the gateways to our spirit. Very carefully select all forms of media that you ingest, especially avoiding those which feed fear. We have seemed to have evolved into a culture of fear in recent years. And you control how much or how little of that you allow to enter your spirit. Very carefully select all forms of media. Know the difference between positivity and negativity. Pay close attention to the difference between facts and feelings, between things that you can and cannot change. And be quick to opt out of unnecessary stress and suffering. Your body will thank you. Next, I want to say that what I know for sure, as I just celebrated my 73rd birthday, is that a successful life is a balanced life. Life is a dance between making it happen and letting it happen. You don't always need to be striving and pushing and grinding. There should be days when you schedule a time of rest and relaxation where you do absolutely nothing. I think humanity has proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that we will never be able to fight our way to world peace or sustainable living. We've made that very apparent over many, many, many years. I think the Dalai Lama said it best. This planet does not need more successful people. This planet desperately needs more peacemakers, more healers, more restorers, more storytellers, and lovers of all kinds. So I'll conclude today by saying that the time has come to heal and educate the hearts of mankind. The world is relying on us as rising leaders to lead this re-education of the hearts of mankind. It is time to embrace and embody radical kindness, cellular compassion, and creative ingenuity. So I call upon all of our rising leaders today to use your unique gifts and talents to be an inspired leader and a force for good. Love is the answer. Unity is the solution. Thank you very much.
Brenda, such powerful, powerful words from you. We greatly appreciate. There's definitely love expressed in our chat, acknowledging that your words are a contribution to life. And I appreciate you speaking about the 4 daily basics and forgiving yourself and so much more. And I look forward to us having some questions shortly. Next, I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Miriam J.A. Chansey. Miriam J.A. Chansey is a Guggenheim Fellow and HBA Chair of the Humanities at Scripps College. She is the author of What Storm, What Thunder, a novel on the 2010 Haiti earthquake, which has been named a best book of fall by Time. The Washington Post, which has been named the best book of fall by Time, the Washington Post, BuzzFeed, the Chicago Tribune, Vulture, Good Housekeeping, Boston.com, Parade, Thrill List, Lit Hub, and Harper's Bazaar, among others. It was shortlisted in the fiction category of the Golden Poppy Awards and is shortlisted for the Aspen Words Literary Prize. Her past novels include The Loneliness of Angels, winner of the 2011 Guyana Prize in Literature Caribbean Award for Best Fiction 2010, The Scorpion Claw and the Spirit of Haiti, shortlisted in the Best First Book category, Canada Caribbean region of the Commonwealth Prize 2004. She has authored several academic books, including Framing Silence, Revolutionary Novels by Haitian Women. Miriam served as an editorial advisor board member for PMLA from 2010 to 2012, a humanities advisor for the Fetzer Institute from 2011 to 2013, and as a 2018 advisor for the John S. Guggenheim Memorial Foundation. Welcome, Dr. Chansey.
Thank you, Sonia, for that introduction. And thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. I also wanted to thank Diane Henry for inviting me to read from What Storm, What Thunder, which is what I'll do today. This is a novel in 10 voices about the 2010 devastating earthquake in Haiti, which killed over 250,000 people and left 1.7 million homeless and with food insecurity. And of course, as you all know, there was a second earthquake in August of last year, which killed upwards of 2,000 people and left about as many home and food insecure. I wrote a piece in the fall for Oprah Daily, and I'll put the link in the chat, which provides more context for how there are connections between the first earthquake and concerns today about securing rights for women and girls. And specifically, what I'll do today is read from a section of the novel in the voice of a 15-year-old girl who ends up in one of the internally displaced people's camp. Those were camps where people were left in refugee conditions within their own country. When these camps arose across the city, there were widespread reports of sexual violence against women, children, and other vulnerable groups. Women's watchdog groups internationally reported that girls especially might be forced into prostitution, and that it was crucial that Haitian women have a seat at decision tables, and this did not happen. Kofaviv, a group formed in 2004 by a group of Haitian women survivors of political rape to assist new victims of sexual violence, worked tirelessly after 2010 to support victims of sexual violence in the camps in an effort to bring perpetrators to justice, but also to bring healing to the victims. Already, earthquake survivors, victims of sexual violence, would suffer from post-traumatic stress for years beyond the events. There's a long history of gendered abuse in Haiti. During the Duvalier regime, feminists were intimidated, tortured, raped. Before that, during the US occupation, James Weldon Johnson, the well-known African-American writer, collected information on behalf of the NAACP, documented similar abuses by US Marines. Before that, as we all know, as in all plantation systems, rapes of enslaved women by colonials were common. But more recently, in 2017, the UN mission to Haiti, MINUSTA, started in 2004, was brought to an end in part because of allegations that UN officers committed gendered crimes in Haiti as far back as 2007, leaving behind fatherless children. While such violence against women and girls by UN soldiers was widespread, there appears to be only one conviction on record. And so I'm going to read from What Storm, What Thunder in this voice of a 15-year-old girl who ends up in an IDP camp and does suffer this violence. And part of the aim of the novel is to bring the situation of Haiti earthquake survivors into an intimate world for the reader, but also to really challenge us, those outside. And I'm Haitian by birth, but those of us who are not Haitian or who might not have had intimate ties to Haiti, to really be willing not to look away from the suffering and vulnerability of women and girls in small places like Haiti. So this is Tafia. It took a few weeks to become accustomed to the tent city below the cathedral, to draw a mental map of its snake-like paths, to create an order in the mind of where things were, the latrines, the place where water was dispensed, food dumped, the tent where medical supplies could be gotten, the spots to find others we knew from the neighborhood, the people to stay away from, the paths on which to make one's way to and from the tent. Paul, my brother, had the idea to tie one of Mama's kerchiefs to the top of our tent so that we could use it like a pole star, a true north in the middle of the messiness of the camp. One day, after I had made a few rounds of the aisles of the tent city I was familiar with, I looked for Mama's red kerchief floating above our stall and started to walk toward it. I was looking up and didn't notice when someone put himself square in the middle of the narrow dirt path that had been made uneven by the rains. By the time I looked down, the man had me by the arm. "You're here." "What?" I looked up at the man whose face was in shadow, the sun overhead behind him. It was Junior, the boy from the schoolyard. I hadn't seen him since the day we girls all went to the club on Delma, to which Stevenson had invited Selena, where we got a first lesson on what it might mean to become women. Now he was smiling maniacally. He was even thinner than I'd remembered, but he was wearing a clean shirt, a bright red bandana tied around his head. "Let go of me," I said. "Not now, but I've got you where I want you." A chill went through me. I remembered the night in the club and in his insistence then, the way the boys acted as if we girls were prizes, things to possess. It made us feel like telenovela stars, but it was also terrifying. We knew where babies came from. At night, we heard screams, and all of us knew what they meant. They weren't screams of despair any longer, but something else, like when dogs are kicked, or worse. I thought of a song I had heard recently in the camp. It was a catchy tune, so catchy that you might miss some of its finer points. What the singer, a man, says in it is that if you give a girl a drink, a cheap imitation juice that costs 12 cents, and a bit of peanut butter that also costs 12 cents, then the girl owes you a dance or something more because you gave her 25 cents worth of stuff, meaning a boy can buy a girl for a quarter. Just because we're poor, it doesn't mean that we're not worth something, I thought, walking away from the song and the boys gathered around the boombox, laughing at the words and slapping their thighs. "What do you want with me?" I struggled against Junior's grip, tried to loosen my arm out of it. He held on firmly. "There's nowhere to run, is there?" I stumbled backward, started walking in the opposite direction to make it look like I hadn't been moving toward the red flag, though I knew he now knew it was ours. I heard him laughing at my back, then calling out to a friend. When I couldn't hear him or see him if I looked back over my shoulder, I tried to look for the flag again. There was too much heat, too many flies, too many bodies. How long would we be without a door to our name, without locks, having to spend every day looking for food and water, depending on the foreigners to come with their trucks of provisions that were not what we needed or reserved for a better class of people? How we longed for a return home. So that's just a little piece of What Storm, What Thunder that I hope people will read. And part of the objective of the novel is to have people think of the right of women and girls to innocence, to security, with futures free of violence and silence around various violations. And I would propose for a call for actions that what we can do as people who reside in the United States or in Canada or other countries where foreign policy is such a big part of a political machine, that we appeal to our elected officials to have better foreign policy with regard to countries like Haiti and, for refugees, migrants, and when cataclysms occur, that we also reach out to women's groups in those countries which know what to do on the ground, that we stay informed about what those groups are and what they do for their own people, and that we listen to women and girls on the ground. Thank you very much for having me. And I'll put some information in the chat for anybody else who wants to follow up on those issues. Thank you.
Dr. Chansey, thank you. Thank you so much for uplifting, the voice of a 15-year-old who would state that you can buy a girl for 25 cents. There's so much power in that, and so much opportunity, yes, for better foreign policy, for so much. And I'd love that we would speak about this a little bit later when we have a Q&A. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Carol Magruder. Carol Magruder is an experienced, seasoned veteran of California's tobacco control and founding member and co-chairperson of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, the AATCLC. I'll say it again, the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. The council was created to inform the direction of tobacco control policy, practices, and priorities. The council works at the intersection of public policy and social justice. The AATCLC has fought against the decades of racialized tobacco industry targeting the Black community, which results in 45,000 Black lives lost each year from tobacco-induced diseases. In 2020, the council filed an administrative lawsuit against the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for failing to take mentholated products off market. Carol received the prestigious 2021 A Call for Boldness Biddy Mason Unsung Shiro Award. Let's please welcome Carol Magruder.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in this world. I have a PowerPoint that I want to share, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see that, folks? Go up here. Okay, here we are. Okay, so it's my extreme honor to be here with you today, and I think about climate change all the time, even though the work that I do is not directly related to that, but I want to share a little bit about my work and the similarities with, because climate change, we feel, at least I do, overwhelmed by it and a sense of powerlessness, because what can we do as small citizens of the world with this big machine going on around us? So I'm titling what I want to talk about today, Run and Not Be Weary, Courage, Tenacity, Faith, and Self-Care. Because I pray a lot as I'm doing the work that I do all over the United States and with reaching out around the world. But we do get tired, we do get weary. And so the goal is not for us to think that we're going to be able to do everything all at once and to take better care of ourselves. So we do get weary, but what do we do to renew ourselves? What do we do to not get that bone tiredness that I felt at different points in my life? So this is me. I want to spend a little time just talking a little bit more about myself. This is me as a student activist at San Francisco State University in the United States in California. In around 1978. So this is that little girl who was so idealistic, gonna get out and change the world. I just had that in my soul as a child growing up and have kept that. And I assume that most of us on this call, on this Zoom, we're here because we care about others. We care about the world. We want to change and do something better for other people, not just individually for ourselves. So what are some of the things that I would say to this little girl? I think I was about 18, 19 at the time, and have been all around the world since then. So this is my council that I helped to found in 2008. And we are doing work in the United States to get menthol cigarettes off the market and to save the lives of the 45,000 Black people who die every year in the United States from tobacco. And so this, and much like climate change, when you talk to people who have a lot of other priorities and issues that we all do, this is something that is pushed to the back burner, but is really the #1 killer of Black people. And I think of climate change in that way because it's always going on, but we have so many other things that are competing for our attention. This is an abstract that we actually submitted in Singapore because we weren't getting any respect or love from our own government in protecting us, just documenting the pernicious predation of by the tobacco industry on African American communities in the United States. And this happens with climate change. So with Miriam, who's from Haiti, I'm going to talk a little bit about Katrina, but how we suffer from these events, these cataclysmical events, and that there are people who come in and profit from that suffering. And that's the fight that we must have. And so we must fight, we must renew ourselves and pace ourselves for the fight against these giants. And so our organization, we call ourselves Giant Slayers because we are engaging with the industry and our own government. And so the lack of protection from our government. And then there are governments that just aren't able to protect their citizens from many of the things that are happening. So as was mentioned already, we are suing our government, which is the Food and Drug Administration. And in that lawsuit, it's us, the Action on Smoking and Health, the American Medical Association, and the National Medical Association, which are the nation's doctors of the United States of America. And the lawsuit is aimed at getting the FDA to act on the authority that they were given in 2009 by President Barack Obama, and that they've yet to do anything about. And so we call it trickle-down public health policy, where things trickle down to us eventually, but not in the beginning. And so at the time when the act was signed, they took all the flavors off the market, but not menthol. And it was generally known and acknowledged that flavors in these products could entice and hook children. And we saw that evidenced by the e-vaping, the vaping cigarette epidemic with young people. So these children were not protected. Our Black babies are just left out there wholesale. And we've been having that David and Goliath fight since then. So I just want to shift and bring in the climate change. So Hurricane Katrina, when I think about, and when I was reviewing these pictures for my presentation, the anger, the hurt, the abject failure of our country to just assist people through something, as cataclysmic as Hurricane Katrina was at that time. Black people were called refugees in their own country, referred to that by the media, and our country's inability to even get people water doing some of these things. So these are some of the images. And when you look at them, they actually look, if you just looked at this picture, you would think this is a picture of an African country someplace, and that these are refugees from war, but this was in the confines of the United States. And these are the things that we need to take on. And Katrina really, I think, was one of the biggest beginning events of these things, these hurricanes, these storms, the climate change, the effects of climate change that we're beginning to see all over the world on a much more regular basis than we had been seeing with all the different changes. And so, what are we going to do about that? What can we do about that as small little citizens in this big picture? And these are just some of those pictures of the anguish of that, what was going on at the time. This is the one I'm going to end on. The water is rising, please help. And that's pretty much where we are now. This was 2005. We're now in 2022, and very little has changed or been done. And I think about in the U.S., as we are talking about the Ukraine war that's going on with Russia, even the profiteers, the comments that we're hearing from our many elected officials, they just want to increase production of gas and oil in the United States. That's their comment about what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. That's their solution. And that's just about making more money. That's not about helping anybody, the Ukrainians or Americans. And so, many times we feel like this is the Titanic, this is a slide from my work, and that folks are going down. And so we want to, as the people who are trying to assist and to help with this, we want to rest before we get tired. And these are some of the things that other sisters have mentioned, a higher power, a belief, a spirituality. This has helped me. Pacing yourself, resting before you get tired, exercise, breathing, finding joy in your life, music, therapy. I'm a big believer in therapy, and that comes in many forms. Having an inner circle of like-minded people, eliminating drama in your life, and don't feel like you have to do everything. Support others who are working on other issues. And there is power in our story, so use it. And there's, the negative that's happened, or what we perceive as negative, is also power. And so we want to tell our stories, remind ourselves of where we come from, where we've been, and use that as personal power. So thank you.
Carol,
and this is our tsunami for good. This is what I add about public health policy, but it fits with our theme of today, which is climate change. Thank you.
It most certainly does. And thank you so much, Carol. And I'm just so proud from California Black Women's Health Project to say that your work has greatly influenced the work that we are doing with our consultant, Dr. Karen Beard, on a menthol project in the Los Angeles area. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. And I'd next like to introduce Larissa Wells, who is a visionary urban planner and advocate for the justice of individuals who are victims of urban and regional planning. Ms. Wells holds a bachelor's degree in urban studies and planning and a master's degree in public administration with a minor in public management and policy analysis. Urban studies and planning encompasses 5 areas of policy: land usage, housing, transportation, public health, and public education. Ms. Wells is an urban planner and administrator. She works to build capacity and opportunities for local governments and addresses environmental and social equity and community resilience issues of housing, public health, climate change, water resource management, space and place, and access to equitable opportunities and services related to public health for people of color and other marginalized groups. Thank you, Larissa. We are so happy to have you join us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for I sound really important right there. Thank you. So yes, my name is Larissa Wells. I'm also the Environmental Justice Chair for the NAACP Greater Sacramento branch. And I was kind of thrown into that, and I'll tell you why. So let me just start here. I had written so many things last night to not have any of them readily available. So let me just speak to y'all on what I know. Since the industrialization of the United States, to 1936 and 1937, with the redlining, and us being African American and brown people being pushed into tenements and ghettos, that of which is an unwritten policy, but is written in the policies, if that makes sense. To the 1956, when Dwight Eisenhower decided he's going to have some freeways and highways go through Black and brown neighborhoods. Of course, it's not going through theirs. but it's going through ours to keep our children and keep us like we're totally expendable. So let me ask this question. How many of you all have gone to the doctor and have the doctor tell you that you have high blood pressure or hypertension and then tell you that it's genetic? That's not always the case. More than likely, it is not the case. But in hindsight, it might be. So if our predecessors and our parents and their parents were going through the same things environmentally that we are going through, then yes, I can understand people having high blood pressure. It is not biological, though. It is transference of generational poverty, in which the powers that be continually attempt to keep Black and brown people in. Okay, so I'm just going to read some things that I did write down. When people think of environmental justice, they usually think of large companies destroying the environment, which ultimately hurts residents in nearby communities. This has been a major problem for centuries, starting with the advent of industrialization, which has made it easier for large companies to expand and impact the environment. Waste dumping in local rivers and water sources is still a major problem, especially here in California, of which there are also additional things that are in the water right now called PSAS. And what that is are tiny slivers of plastic that are found that come from people building these so-called affordable housing complexes. Nobody's monitoring them. The materials are going down into the water, and the water goes out into the drinking water. And then thus we end up with things like cancers, respiratory problems, asthma. Back in the day, we used to boil water in order to remove some of the bacteria. But let me say this, there is a lot of lead that is in the water. Lead, arsenic, PSAS, chromium 6 and 3, which can and does cause cancer, which they're not going to tell you about. This powers that be. It's very interesting that it's in certain neighborhoods, but Black and brown people in lower socioeconomic areas, it is not. Nobody's telling you because it appears that we are expendable. Much like that picture that we just saw of Katrina in Haiti, same thing is going on right here. So some companies either do not realize or do not care that they're dumping chemicals. I'm gonna say that they don't care. People realize what they're doing because they make a conscious decision on where to put things. Yes? Okay. Dumping chemicals in nearby water sources can contaminate drinking water and poison many parts of the environment. By the way, when we try to boil that water and there's lead in it, you're not boiling the lead out. It's only intensifying the lead. And so then that makes me wonder, when women have children and they're coming up with this autism, in the last 15, 20 years, autism has expanded. And I'm saying, why? Is it in the water? So that's one of the major things that I'm working on right now is water, because that's one thing that nobody is questioning. As far as we just got to drink because we're so used to survival techniques, especially being Black and brown women, especially Black women. You know, how you doing today, girl? I'm just making it. You know, it's that kind of thing. And so this is why I'm here today. In these cases, community members are rarely, if ever, consulted in the decision-making process. This means that companies can unilaterally make decisions that hurt the environment and community with little oversight, if any, or input from community members. Environmental justice or injustice refers to a set of actions that harm the environment while simultaneously alienating specific groups and communities. A common example of this phenomenon is a company, let's say Chevron in Richmond, California. Those people in Richmond are hugely, I've known so many young people to die from cancer. So many. That refinery continues to blow all the time. But nobody, and they give the people a couple of pennies because they're already poor. So we're just gonna give you a couple of pennies and have y'all be quiet. Meanwhile, your children are suffering from asthma and other health-related illnesses. Environmental justice is a systemic problem resulting from the alienation and segregation of specific groups within communities, and this includes redlining. We were pushed and we are pushed into certain areas that have landfills and where people can just dump landfills. Chemical plants, let's say Louisiana is big on chemical plants. When you see those things that are over your head and because the rent is cheap, and we know that there's a huge income gap still. Okay, so yes, naturally people are being pushed over here. And I don't care if you have a 800 credit score, they're still gonna stick you with, guess what? You can go buy a house over here because they, that single family zoning kept a lot of so-called affordable housing out. Now, moving forward, Bayview Hunters Point in San Francisco has the largest infant mortality rate, as well as breast cancers out of all of California. That small area. And that happened because of that shipyard that was there. And the government clearly said, because I watched the news that day, I saw with my own eyes and heard with my own ears, we are not cleaning up anything. But then when they removed the people unlawfully from Bayview Hunters Point in that project area and put other people there, all of a sudden they're cleaning up the area. The area is so contaminated that it is illegal in San Francisco for you to plant food in the ground. You have to have raised beds. So they know that this problem exists. So is this intentional? You be the judge. So I want to end with this. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let me begin with the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, because I'm a big proponent of this. It begins with we the people. Stop right there. We the people. And when you look at history, you will see Black and brown women all over the place in the front lines, always. Not only are we in the front lines fighting for civil rights and justice, we're fighting for our children, we're fighting for ourselves, and we're fighting for the ones that come behind us. We don't just fight for self, we fight for everybody. The life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness applies to us too. It applies to us. So somewhere along the line, we forgot that we hold the power. So let me remind you, in that 2020 election, who was it that pushed the president now over the edge? It was us. Who was it that was mobilizing those people in Georgia? It was us. Who was it out here in California? It was us. Women, Black women, guess what? We still standing at the forefront. We're still fighting because as long as we Black, look like we're going to have to do that. And that's all right. So let me just end you with this. We have a whole host of women that have made impact. Ella Baker was a civil rights activist who founded the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. We have Dr. Maya Angelou, a Pulitzer Prize nominated poet and civil rights activist. We have Grace Lee Boggs, the daughter of Chinese immigrants, who was a prominent writer and activist who worked closely with Black Marxists and Black power leaders like Malcolm X and her husband, James Boggs, during the 1960s. We have Charlotte Hawkins Brown, Melanie Campbell, Laverne Cox, Shirley Chisholm, Angela Davis. We have so many strong and powerful women. That power also lies in us. It lies in us. All we got to do is call it up and out. I'm ready. How about you? Thank you.
Larissa, you are the activist of activists. And I am so proud to say for California Black Health Project that we have had you to speak with our sisters in our sister circles. And you really do, promote advocacy in a way that we don't always hear. And I appreciate you so much.
One more thing, if I can just say one more thing, let me please encourage you all or anybody who is on here, anybody who listens. Again, you have the power. Find out, go to your city council meetings, demand to be heard. You have that right. Stand in front of City Hall. Go to every protest, sign up with some organizations like the NAACP or the Black Women's Project. Sign up for these things so you can understand, because let me tell you something, they're not going to tell you, but we will. Okay?
Your voice is so necessary. Thank you so much. I am going to next introduce Dora Morima. And Dora is a portfolio head municipal sustainability is the portfolio head municipal sustainability at the South African Local Government Association. Dora has worked with a wide range of NGOs and in different sectors in rural and urban settings, focusing on land reform, gender equality, and environmental sustainability since 1997. She has worked with a broad array of multi-stakeholder participatory initiatives involving communities, NGOs, government, and other institutions in various sectors, including small-scale agriculture, environment, climate change, renewable energy, gender equality, and land rights at local, national, and international levels. Dora co-founded an NGO called Gender CC, Southern Africa Women for Climate Change, for Climate Justice in 2008, to work with civil society organizations, activists, and experts from the Southern African region working for women's rights and gender and climate justice. We welcome you, Dora. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I really hope that my network is not going to let me down because I've been struggling with bandwidth. So yes, I have worked quite a number of years in South Africa, in Southern Africa, and also internationally on on issues of gender and climate change. Very much taking a pro-women stance, purely because in the country where I live, in South Africa, which is one of the most unequal societies in the world, women have been left behind for many, many decades. And anything that that you work on that does not actually acknowledge and recognize that inequality is going to have the potential to undermine every effort that you put in. I have worked, with young women. I have worked also with older women. I have worked at the policy level. I have worked at the implementation level. And now I work at the local government level. And I think it's important to highlight that for the longest of time, we have always been referring women in these spaces of climate change as being victims. And the responses and the strategies and the interventions as a result have also been modeled alongside the same lines, where women, obviously, with them being the majority of the poor, in where I live in Africa, but also in the developing world, and really heavily reliant on natural resources and subsistence agriculture, purely because of the of the way that they've been socialized. In the olden days, in my mother's generation, they were groomed to become someone's wife and not necessarily someone who would become an active contributor to society. So they have been, we find that a lot of them, women, are not able to move around easily. They are left behind. And I've been listening to the inputs that were made on Katrina and women in Haiti and all those. And I think it's all in line with what is happening here in Africa, in South Africa as well, that women are always the ones that are left behind to look after the other vulnerable members of society, the children and the elderly. And they then are the ones who are in the front line when a disaster hits. Men are easy, they can be able to move around and find other ways, of survival. And move into bigger cities with access to resources. So when women are left behind. However, having been working a lot with Gender CC internationally as well, I realized that we need to shift for us to be able to move and to ensure that women are taking part and that they are part of the solution and always not being, pieced as being, virtuous, which places a lot of pressure on women to become the heroes, in all situations, or even pieced to become victims, which completely takes away the power that they have. Is that we need to focus on the structural and systematic issues that are keeping women in poverty, keeping women, not being able to access their finances and the resources that they need to be able to move away from, from being reliant heavily on the natural resources, which are badly being affected by climate change. That we need to have women at the table when we're framing this funding, funding programs. We've got we've got the climate finance, right? We've got the adaptation finance. We've got all of this big funding. However, the challenge is that they are not designed with those who are impacted the most. So if you've got a population which is mostly women, and in particular, the poor or Black women, and you are designing products that are not speaking to their issues, you already are not able, you are already excluding them in that design. And you find that these funds, they require complex application systems. They assume that everybody's able to read and write and everybody's able to access things on the internet. They assume that people are very, women are aware in terms of where to get this information, but also how to apply, because they do not receive. And constantly the funding is pitched at like what, 1 billion rands or $1 million US, which is not what many of the women that are in the front line are actually requesting at the time. So, I always say that women should be afforded an opportunity to be part of the climate solution, and not mostly because they are heroes or heroines, purely because they are supposed to be part of the climate change response. And I think, being in Africa and working in sustainability for a long time, environmental sustainability, when we talk about renewable energy or talk about energy as being a contributor to climate change and us looking for solutions, I find that the solutions that are pitched are looking at how can we make better stoves for women. And I get so irritated by that, because what this does, it perpetuates the whole notion of women being, always been relegated into the K economy, where they have to be cooking or cleaning up or, doing all of this, instead of thinking about how can women be part of the renewable energy solutions, not only as end users, but as producers. How about we think about coming up with interventions where women can be able to manufacture the solar water geysers that we are advocating, or or instead of exporting, bringing in, importing all the parts that are making the solar panels into our countries. Why can't we make funds available and women can own factories to be able to manufacture? We are not only responding to climate change, but we're also reducing the poverty that many women are trapped in this country where I live. So I think, it is a structural problem. It is a systematic problem. And if we are only going to be looking at just thinking, oh, we need to solve the issues of climate change, we cannot go back to how the world has been before COVID. We need to build back better, but building back better, it means we need to start questioning some of the world systems and institutions that exist. Some of them, they literally exist and thrive by keeping many women in poverty and not really affording them the voice and the seat, and really keeping them in relegating them to users of information and technology, which often is not appropriate. I think, I worked over 20 years in the civil society and NGOs, and I'm now studying my master's, and I'm asking my research question is, has the projects that have been running, funded mainly by European countries, have they assisted in any way in solving the issues of gender inequality in responding to climate change? Or have people like myself, when I was working with Gender CC, being co-opted to really push an agenda that actually is not going to see us being transformed as the world, getting us closer to cutting down the greenhouse emissions and reducing poverty and inequality? So, that's the question that I hold. I look back at all of the projects that I have been part of when I was a director of Gender CC, and looking at, have we actually done what we're supposed to do? And I think the question is emerging as I'm doing my research. The answer is no. Because the donors give us the funding already decided. We can only just find something that fits. So we've got no voice. The women that the projects are intended to also have got no voice. They are literally just recipients of these grants that come in. And a lot of them, I tested one grant, I remember about 3 years ago, and we wanted to set up an entrepreneurship school called the Green Business College. And a lot of that funding is not really available to support women in venturing into the green economy and the social entrepreneurship connected to the solving the issues of climate change. They must just continue receiving the grants and to do whatever they can do. However, we are not allowed to move outside of the box in terms of being innovative, because women, unfortunately, in South Africa, in Africa, they cannot wait. They are already adapting to the impacts of climate change. They're not waiting for somebody to come and save them. What we need to do is to go down instead of coming from top to bring in solutions, is for us to go down to listen and to witness and to see how women are already responding, and lift that up and make sure that it's all being fitted into the policy that we're coming up with, into the programs and all the response strategies. So for me, for us to be able to stay healthy as we work in this work, is to connect with each other around the world. There are many, many amazing stories. I am an Atlantic Fellow with Reverend Souls. I am for working with women across the Atlantic Ocean to really understand and to connect and to see how women are responding, and what is it that we can be able to already start cross-pollinating, share the great stories, and share the inspiration and all the work that is being done across the world. Because look, as it's been said that the world that we are waiting for is already here. It is definitely here. And I think on a good day, you can be able to see it, you can be able to smell it. And we just literally need to get out of our comfort zone and actually start sharing, because a system is not going to fall by itself, right? The capitalist system that has been designed to exclude many around the world, it needs to be challenged by building another parallel system. And we can only do that when we are able to come together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Thank you. Oh, again, such powerful words on, opportunities for change and for movement, in climate change and how it impacts Black women and girls, globally. And so all of the panelists today, I just want to thank each and every one of you. I mean, what you have, really uplifted, for me, and I hope for our audience, which aligns so much with our work at California Black Women's Health Project, is what we refer to as the vertical and horizontal advocacy. That advocacy that Dora spoke about, women working across the globe, working together, to address change. But many of you also spoke about the vertical advocacy of how we, seek out, better foreign policy, better regional policies, better opportunities for changes in the way that companies are operating in our communities. Larissa spoke, so strongly about the connection and the intersection between chronic diseases and other diseases and environmental justice. And, just listening to Brenda, speak earlier, she spoke so much about, what we need to do to heal and to educate the hearts of mankind. And that this radical kindness and this opportunity to create ingenuity and what it can do to, uplift women and girls everywhere. And I want to thank Carol Magruder, who brought up, this notion of a David and Goliath fight, that we are engaged in, which often does leave us tired and weary. But as Fannie Lou Hamer said, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we will work together, to address, some of these major issues and challenges. And I was so also inspired by Dr. Chansey and, the novel that she wrote on elevating experiences and the challenges that women and girls are facing in Haiti, and the need for us to, look at women's groups, around the world, that can work together. And this is in part why we're here. And all of this gives us an opportunity to uplift our mental health and to guard our mental health in the face of the impacts of climate change on our lives, on our ability, as Dora talked about, to earn an income, to work in those spaces where, women are either forced to be heroes or to be victims, in climate change situations, with that reliance on the natural resources, but it's the natural resources that we rely on, that are mostly impacted by by climate change and climate injustice. So I want to thank all the panelists. We have a very short time left. I'd like to open this up to our audience and ask if there are any questions. If we could, at this point, unmute. If there are questions, if you could use the reactions section on your Zoom to raise your hand, and then I will be able to call on you. If you have a question, we'll just pause for one moment to give everyone the opportunity. And the reactions button is located at the bottom of the Zoom screen if you're on your computer, and you can click raise your hand. I do see the first hand raised, Kimberly Range. Kimberly, please, do you have a question?
I don't have a question, more so I think than a comment. This was an excellent program. I almost didn't make it because I'm multitasking with work. So, and this goes alongside of what I do. I actually work in public health at the federal level. I work for the Health Resources and Services Administration, where we provide federal funds to community 501c3 organizations. If you ever heard of FQHCs, Federally Qualified Health Centers. So with that being said, I won't tell too much because, like I said, I'm multitasking, but this was actually excellent. And in my community, I belong to several organizations: Delta, Links, NCBW, and the ACP. And this is actually something that I would love to bring into our community, so that we, sometimes bringing it to a smaller group, it's like they're able to, we would be able to, one, comprehend, understand what the issues are, and also how we can, as a cohort of Black organizations, sort of partner or collaborate on an issue like this. And so having that more intimate type of community presentation like this, I think it would be helpful, because I learned some things today that I would love for, the organizations that I belong to, be advocates for the people in our community, because we're in the Valley of California. So we're probably faced with pesticides, and I know my mom caught valley fever years ago, and she's fine. She just has to be, chest X-rays, periodically. And so, just understanding all of this, and I think it would be a benefit for this to one day come into our community for discussion.
Kimberly, I would encourage you to begin with a copy of this presentation today. It'll be available in multiple places, and as you register, we should be able to contact you and provide you with a link, and that you could use this probably as an introduction to the groups that you're working with. So thank you so much. I'm glad that you joined us, and I'm glad that you found some takeaways from this event today.
I did. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there others who will raise their hand? And if not, you can put your questions in the chat, and we will be able to address those questions. If you have a specific question for one of our panelists, please let us know that. Christopher DeShield, please, if you'd ask your question.
So, no dark where I'm at, I suppose. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking the question. I would like to reiterate something that the previous questioner mentioned about how wonderful the event was. And also, I'm interested in using what I heard, what I learned today as well in my own work. I'm a teacher. I lecture at a university in Belize. At the University of Belize, and I have a class in literature. I teach in the Department of Languages and Literature, and we are interested right now in the uses of literature at this moment with climate change and addressing social miseries and that kind of thing. So I mean, this, just to see the panel, the array of speakers here from different areas of inquiry and action was incredible. I'd like to communicate this to my own students, how these things can interact. And like the previous questioner as well, I was trying to multitask at the same time too because of work issues. But I was writing down some of the quotes that came up here in discussion, and it was quite remarkable to see so many of the activists speaking, mention the power of story, say, so that was very useful to me to hear, for personal power. And I'm interested in hearing some of the panelists discuss or talk about what place novels, say, might have. So this is sort of directed to Miriam Chansey, I suppose, but also the others. I heard in the discussion this idea that some of these novels and stories would be shedding light on real world situations. But what about, fiction? How can that intervene here, telling stories about these things? What role do you see works of literature playing in addressing real world issues here? Any comments on those types of things would be very much interesting for myself and for students that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. We appreciate your comments and your question. Dr. Chansey, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond because, of course, I was reading from a novel, so I was right in in your field. But I'm also a professor of literature, and so I write academic books. And in the period right after the earthquake, I wrote a lot of op-eds on the situation, for both the intellectual response to the earthquake and the activist response. And hopefully those essays will be coming out in the next year or two as a collected volume. But some of them can be found online, like the Oprah Daily piece. But the reason I wrote the novel is because I spent those 3 years making connections between groups in the US and on the ground. Sometimes groups even within Haiti were not aware of each other. And because I work on Haitian women's literature and knew all the women's groups, I was often a conduit for different groups. Or sometimes even, I had journalists sometimes calling me saying they wanted to do a piece on women's issues and couldn't get access to a camp on the ground. And so getting them a fixer, getting them, transportation on the ground. I just happened to have those connections and I was a trusted person. But I wrote the novel because by 2013, many people had forgotten about this. And I would imagine this is the same issue as what Carol was talking about in terms of Hurricane Katrina. People forget, we see the cataclysms, and then often people are talked about in as a mass, the Haitians, the New Orleans people, we talk about people as a mass, as opposed to communities, collectives, individuals. And then I think, as Larissa was also mentioning, that gender falls out. We don't speak specifically about women and girls. So the novel covers, different genders, different ages, different occupations, different socioeconomic backgrounds in terms of a narrative voice. But the reason I think fiction can do a different job is that it's more accessible than the academic projects that at least I'm engaged in, which have a limited, purview. And so the novel, is accessible at many, as a genre, is accessible to many different readerships. And I've been surprised how many different kinds of people have been reading What Storm with Thunder for different reasons. It also made a list, Kirkus's list of best novels of 2021 on climate issues. It was one of 7 books that they listed. And often people don't understand that the climate issue is also a gender issue, as I think was being mentioned in the chat, because groups that are in the Southern Hemisphere or impoverished, even in North America, are affected in ways that are exponentially greater because of poverty, because of lack of access to infrastructure, because of governmental neglect, and so forth. I think what a novel does is bring attention to those issues in an intimate fashion. You get to know the characters as people first, and then as people that are part of families, that are part of collectives, and then that brings it into the global context. So I think this is what literature can do, poetry can do, and as we'll soon hear, a song can do, but other kinds of forms cannot do, or cannot do as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tansi.
And Ken, I'd like to add in, because we are, and I'm an avid reader, and we need to use all of the forces that we have to get people involved, to educate. And one of the things that we've been doing with our councils, we've been having spoken word contests, so poetry slams. And we're going to be having one in Washington, D.C. on June 18th. The day is for Juneteenth, but Father's Day is on Juneteenth. So the Saturday before Father's Day, it will be in Washington, D.C. And we will be putting it out live on Facebook or some of these social media. But, you know, you don't have a movement until you have art. And so whether it's written novels or music, poetry. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to, even though we're talking about death and dying and all these things, but you want to have fun and you want to uplift people's spirits. And I know Denise does that because there's enough doom and gloom. So we have to find a way to get our message. So we're educating people, but at the same time, what you're doing something that's joyful, that's meaningful for people, and that touches their hearts and their minds at the same time, but that gives them hope at the same time. So I think that's very, very important. And also teaches people how to read and write, or makes them be inspired to read and write, which is also important.
And Carol, thank you so much for mentioning art and mentioning. And I'd like to actually introduce you all. Denise Lyles Cooks is known as the Oracle. She's a motivational speaker, published author, educator, and artist known as a healer of the heart, mind, body, and soul. Why the Oracle? In her words, I'm told that I say what people need to hear. Her interest in climate change and mental health issues and how the youth are affected brought her to this year's NGO CSW 66. The Oracle is a high school teacher for LAUSD, a two-time spoken word Billboard Award winner, and the owner-operator of Oracle Publishing, a boutique performance, editing, design, and copywriting company. Her true nature is summed up in her motto, always remember to love yourself. Denise, please. We can close out with you.
Music maestro.
And while we're doing that, I'd like to just thank everyone for joining us, and for our host, Diane Mitchell and Ruth C. Berman. Thank you so much.
You know, when I wrote this piece, can you turn the volume up, please? When I wrote this piece, my producer asked me what I would do in a cataclysmic event. I said I was going to rise above it and go walking on air. So come with me. Let's go walking. I can't hear the music. Turn it up, please. I'm walking on air, wings spread wide. Mother Earth to my left, Father Universe on my right side. The sun in my face, the moon high up above. The wind embraces me, the mist covers me in love. But I'm concerned for this universe. Where will you go? I'm gonna be walking, walking on air. I'm walking, walking on air. I'm walking, walking on air. Come go with me. Walking, walking on air. I'm walking on air. Not a care in the world. My sister, serenity, peace, and contentment. I'm hanging out with the girls. The sea beneath me, the sky high up above. I spread my wings and soar. In this world, I am free. Tell me, where will you go? When there is no more sunshine, when the sun and the moon collide, the ocean tides stop, the air does not flow. where will you go? My feet step lightly where the gods once played. It is an honor to greet my ancestors where they once lay. I'm playing hopscotch, tag, and hide and go seek in God's playground, this great universe reality. The sunrise and sunset are no longer in conflict, at ends with the universe. They come together to forge a new planet where man may never traverse. I'm walking on air, wings spread wide. Mother Earth to my left, Father Universe on my right side. The sun in my face, moon high up above. The wind embraces me, the mist covers me in love. I'm covered in love because I've been walking with the gods. Come go with me. Walking, yeah. Walking on it. Walking on it. Not a care in the world. My sister's serenity, peace, and contentment. I am one of the girls. The sea beneath us, the sky high up above. We spread our wings of joy. We spread our wings of love. All over God's universe. Because we've been walking with the gods. Come go with us. Walking on it. Walking on it. Walking, fly. Walking with me. I'm gonna spread my wings around God's universe.
Always remember to love yourself.
Come, fly.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you so much. Miss Magruder, I'm going to check out your thing, your spoken word.
All right.
I would just ask if Diane or Rupsi would like to come back on and share any
Yes.
final words with our guests who are here with us.
Yes. Very thankful for this. I did not know this is how beautiful and how powerful this was going to turn out to be. I'm just amazed. There were, during the discussions, there were some moments that hit me really hard. I was like, it made me wonder that really this is going on and this is the 21st century. And we are still wondering, for basic necessities because of color. I mean, what is this? That whole thing that, helped because the water is rising, that thing of, from New Orleans, I think that's where we had Katrina, right? That area. That was devastating because, pictures speak a lot more than words. So when we showed those images, they really stuck to me. And I was like, I was in New Orleans when I was a student. I went there for a college, we went for some work. But it never occurred to me that this is how Katrina would destroy and people would be standing there asking for help. That's it. Just, I kind of choked when I saw that because I've been to that place and it's amazing how much work each of, the panelists, what a panel. Oh my goodness. I'm so grateful to have connected with each of you. I'm really grateful and I hope to stay in touch with you because of all the power that this group just brought on stage. I'm also wondering, had we done this really at the UN General Assembly or, somewhere, because I visit the United Nations every year, had we done this, had we all traveled to the UN, this group, I think, would have had at least over 200 people in that room. I've been in rooms like that where there are over 200 people. It all depends on the speakers. This speaker panel has that potential to bring in all those people at the UN. And, you know, it's open, we open our doors, so people keep more and more people coming in. So it's just, I just want to do this again with all of you in maybe in a couple of years, or maybe next year if we can, right at the UN. It's just, it's so powerful. And I'm so grateful to have connected with each of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I want to just piggyback on what Ruchi said. All of you have been amazing. When we decided to do this, as usual, it's following not what's really happening to us individually, but thinking collectively and thinking globally. And this is what we have to really emphasize. And I heard how strong unity makes a difference. And if we continue to do that, take our messages not from the top, but we as grassroots workers and leaders, these are the things that we must stay on top of. It is bringing everyone to the table because we know what is needed. We are not looking for handouts. We can hand things out ourselves. We're not looking for nickels and dimes. We're looking to not have the systems to oppress us from becoming economically strong. We can become our own resources, but we must band together and understand that we're not going to give up. We're continuing to rise, and the more we give that message out, the more we can. And so, on that note, let's continue to power up our love, power up our self esteem, power up our self worth, not only for climate change justice, but for humanity. Thank you so much. You are really, really amazing.
On that note,
Give
before
yourselves
everybody
a
gets
high
out of here,
five.
everyone unmute. Follow after me. Power up for self-love. Power up for self-esteem. Power up for self-worth, for climate change justice. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3. Power up for self-love. Power up for self-esteem. Power up for self-worth, for climate change justice.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, all right, all right.
Love that energy. Love that energy. What a way to start a week, guys. This is like amazing. This is just Monday morning. It's like 10:30 here.
Yeah.
Can we end the recording now?
Yes.
I think so. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.